Hey everybody, and welcome to the 2022 SIOP Annual Conference Town Hall, first live town hall I think we've ever done. My name is Richard. I'm the 2022 Conference Program Chair, also faculty at University of Minnesota. This sort of live interactive session is basically to answer questions about the conference. We've made a lot of changes. There are a lot of changes related to how we are handling the pandemic and sort of the uncertainty surrounding that. So we just thought it would be a good idea to check in, especially just to increase comfort level, answer questions, basically make you a little bit more comfortable with how the conference will go. So I will throw in a note here that if you are a regular gig viewer, this is probably a little weird because we're on the channel for a podcast that I do with Tara Barron called The Great IO Get Together, which is IO psychology centric show. Please note that the gig and SIOP are different things. They are not actually related to one another. The core connecting feature in that is me. So I'm host on the gig, but also the program chair for the Seattle conference. So this is not an official gig thing. It's just on the gig channel. But if you're interested in an IO podcast, please subscribe. If you are new to this kind of interface, we are in YouTube Live, which means that we get your comments. I want to say about 15-20 seconds. It might be a little bit longer depending on how the stream looks. About some amount of time after you actually post it in the YouTube live chat. So definitely within about a minute. So if you have questions and you're going to want us to answer anything later, please now leave those comments and those questions as we give you kind of a brief intro to some of the major concerns that we think that you might want to know about. So we're planning to spend only about 10-ish minutes giving some foundational stuff. So if you don't ask questions, not going to have a lot to talk about later. So please put your questions in YouTube chat. But with that, I will hand it over to our conference chair, Whitney.
Great. Thanks, Richard. And thanks for everyone for being here. I just wanted to take a moment. My name is Whitney, and I'm the conference chair for 2022, and I'm also faculty at University of Houston downtown. So just wanted to offer a little bit of background. As always, our goals are aligned for the conference with SIOP's mission. And in 2020, when there was the first transition to virtual, the leadership at the time started guiding principles to help navigate the complex times. And that's something that we've carried forward when I took the baton in 2021 and now in 2022 as well. And it's really helped the conference committee stay focused on our kind of core goals and what we need to accomplish in context or in light of SIOP's mission. So those are to, one, preserve the capacity of our volunteers and staff and conference revenue during these complex times, especially. A second guiding principle has been to display regular communication and transparency with the SIOP community, hopefully as evidenced here today. So thank you again for being here. And then also honoring all the cutting edge intellectual contributions, as well as inclusiveness with respect to diversity, particularly this year, including modes of participation. And that really leads us to one of the major changes for this coming conference in 2022, which is that we will, for the first time, have an in-person and virtual registration. So that means that you can, from the get-go, so you can designate as being an in-person registrant or a virtual registrant. And this, Richard's going to say more about this in just a moment. So I'm going to kind of pause my comments, but this is for creating basically a virtual pathway for both presentation and then also participation. So next up, as far as changes go, we are going to the West. We're going to Seattle. And somewhat interestingly, we are a convention center-based and hotel-based conference this year as far as physical locations in the facilities. So oftentimes, as many of you know, we're in a primarily one flagship hotel with some others to support. And this time we are primarily at the convention center for all the educational programming, the Washington State Convention Center, which I should mention, it's just a few blocks from all the other selected hotels, with the flagship hotel being the Sheraton. And the Sheraton will be where the opening plenary and other of the major social networking events take place. One key related update regarding location and health and safety is that just recently the Seattle and King County health officer issued a public health order requiring full vaccination status or a negative test to enter an indoor entertainment or recreation area. So that includes the Washington State Convention Center, which is where we'll be registering. And as I said, the majority of the education, if not all of the educational programming, will be taking place. Now, we don't know, obviously, as we're all well aware with the pandemic conditions, what it will be like in April, but these vaccine testing requirements are becoming more common across the country for venues, large venues such as conventions, concerts, etc. So we want you to be aware of this and consider this when making your decision about an in-person or virtual registration. And as always, we'll continue to evaluate things and monitor as we march on towards April, but wanted to put that out there for you now and consider that in your decision-making process. So let's see here. One other change that I wanted to make you aware of is that we're shifting the timeline slightly. So we've experimented, as you know, in 2020 and 2021 with the virtual offerings and when to offer those. So we are going to be having a 4-week conference experience, which is somewhat akin to 2020. However, one of the lessons learned was trying to kind of streamline the offerings. And so to that end, you can find on the SIOP website more detailed information about what will be happening in each week. So there's pre-conference week, and then there's conference week 1, which will be virtual only. This will include a conference kickoff, posters, interactive breaks, and then conference week 2 will be the in-person and virtual offerings. This will start on Wednesday evening. So this is something to note as well, that traditionally or historically, the opening plenary has started on Thursday morning at 8 a.m. We're moving that up, and that'll actually be a Wednesday evening event starting off at 5 p.m. and then rolling right into the evening welcome reception for all attendees. So we hope to see you there. And then somewhat complimentary, we'll be ending a bit earlier on Saturday so that people can get back some of their weekend. Hopefully you can have the chance, if you're out there, to enjoy and explore Seattle. We will be planning some volunteer and tourist type activities for those of you who will be out there with us. And obviously, if you need to catch a plane right back home, we understand that as well with time zones. And then post-conference week, everything will be available on Hula. Or I shouldn't say everything, most everything will be available on Hula that we've recorded. All right, so I think those are the major changes on the conference front. So with that, I'm going to pause and turn it over to Richard and then get into the Q&A. Is that Richard outlined for us?
Sure. I will say we're already getting a good slew of questions, which is great. We will leave that to the Q&A period after I talk. But I do see it, Julia, Chris, Alexandra, Andre, Anita, and Caitlin. We will get to all those in just a few minutes. Also, it occurs to me that we didn't necessarily preface this by explaining why there are 2 different people doing this. So for those not deep in SIOP's administrative structures, it might not be obvious that we have both a conference and program chair. So my responsibility, as opposed to what Whitney does and was talking about, is I focus on specifically the sort of scholarly program itself, like how the schedule shapes up in terms of, which sessions are accepted and why, and how do we determine criteria for acceptance and putting the schedule together and that kind of thing. So that's where I'm going to focus. There are a number of changes this year. And to be honest, a lot of this is based on historical things that I was annoyed about when I submitted, when I was not a program chair. So the first of those is a simplification of the roles that you can be when submitting. So historically, we've had this huge set of panelists and discussants and all sorts of things. The reason for that historically was because we, in the printed program, had a lot of attention placed to the conference program. A lot of attention was on people in exactly the right kind of order and attributed in exactly a particular kind of way. As we move to be a little more green, a little less paper dependent, we move to more of an online program, and that just gives us a lot more flexibility in terms of how we allocate and place things. So one of the simplifications that I've done, or that I started, that we've done, is to simplify the roles into just two. We have the speaker, which is somebody that's talking, and then we have a non-speaking contributor, which is everybody else. That we still recognize, or you can recognize, it's really up to you, the specific role that people play in your sessions, but that's based on what we call the APA style citation in the submissions. And there you can specify whatever kind of credit is important to you and to those people that are in your session. So we still have that. It's just not, it's not central on the program side, because our concern is that we need to figure out how to schedule people so they don't have overlapping sessions. So that's now what we collect. That means all the other rules that used to apply to like chairs and co-chairs and discussants and whatnot, all of that's changed to focus on speakers and non-speakers. So that's kind of a larger overarching change. We've also clarified some of the submission rules. This is actually not anything new, but we changed how they're presented to make it a little clearer what they are. We have a live supervision rule, which really means that you can't have just a straight student presentation. That's not, it used to be like people would have like co-chairs that were advisors, and there are all sorts of weird configurations that people use in order to address not having all students. Now it's a lot simpler. You need to have at least one non-student speaker in your session somewhere. We still have rule of three, which now applies to speakers instead of to the chair, co-chair, whatever it was before. We still have the diversity of affiliation rule, meaning you can't, for non-posters and non-master tutorials, you can't have all people from one institution or one affiliation. And we have the ownership rule, which is also not new, but the person who submits it has to be a SIOP member, which is pretty much the same. And I will add, it has to be a up-to-date on their membership piece, SIOP member. That's the other piece. The actual submission process itself is also a little different. So don't use the templates that you've used in the past, or like take an old version and just copy paste it, because there's a lot of little changes. We've removed the press paragraph entirely, for example. That actually historically has not really been used for anything, I found out. So why do it? So we've cut out the press paragraph. I've lengthened the abstract as the counter to that, so that you have a little bit more space to talk about what your session is about. And that full abstract will appear in Whova for accepted sessions, so they can see just one normal looking paragraph explaining what your session's about. We have the APA style citation I mentioned before. We now allow 80-minute submissions for all types except for poster. It used to be some types were 50 and some types were 80 and some types were either, and we simplified all of that. So now posters or poster sessions and everything else can be the length that you want. But having said that, 50-minute sessions are much easier to schedule. We have a lot more space for 50-minute sessions, so I would strongly recommend submitting 50 if you can, just because it just allows more diversity on the program, and we just appreciate that choice. Really big change is, of course, this virtual submission option. So virtual presentation and virtual submission are not the same as virtual attendance, and we've got to be really clear on this point. The goal of the entire virtual program is really to increase accessibility. It is not because we view like a two-track conference, or that we're creating some, long-term vision for having like a full-blown virtual program. It's specifically to help people who otherwise would not be able to attend the conference and present at the conference. So the virtual presentation option means that anybody that wants to have a virtual submission, at least one person needs to meet the virtual presentation qualifications, which are explained in the call for proposals. It's pretty broad as to what it means. If you have any speaker that is employed by a company, by an organization that doesn't want anybody doing any in-person travel, that is a qualification. Any disabilities or movement restrictions that make it difficult to go in person, any significant health concerns, that will include, if you just think, for my personal safety, I am not comfortable, even in April right now, I know I'm not going to be comfortable going out in the middle of a pandemic, regardless of vaccination and national restrictions or whatever else there might be. That also qualifies. We have family-related and caregiving restrictions. Some folks with small children, it varies. Sometimes people want to bring their kids. Some people are just like, I'm not going to put myself through that. As I say, having having a 6-year-old, whatever the option is. If you don't want, if those restrictions mean that you don't feel like you are able to attend in person realistically, that option is there for you. And for people that are outside the United States, people we would normally lose because of expensive travel to the United States from other countries, and for folks that are outside of biopsychology. So that's our standardized set, essentially, of virtual presentation qualifications. For any session, if any one person meets any of those, then you are able to submit a virtual presentation. That doesn't mean that you are all suddenly going to be attending virtually. It only means that one of you is, or at least one of you is. And you have the option to have mixed attendees in a virtual session. So if you are an in-person presenter, you plan to be on site, and somebody in your session is unable to be there, we have, you can all present virtually, but some of you can physically be in person. And we're actually setting up, and this might be more on Whitney's side. I don't know what kind of progress has been made here, but we're actually setting up spaces in the conference center so that if you're presenting, there'll just be a room you can go to, and we'll be ready for you to, set up on Zoom and be part of a virtual session, and then you can go right back into the fray. So we're trying to support that kind of mixed approach for the people that are attending in person. So yeah, the attendance, on the other hand, is different. The attendance for virtual, I think, is a little less expensive. That's more conference than program. So people that are attending virtually will be able to see the whole virtual program. And that virtual program will also include 1 or 2 tracks, still deciding that, of content in the in-person session that will be live broadcast virtually. So there'll be a couple of those. There'll be mostly the SIOP curated content, like the invited sessions and award sessions and that kind of stuff. Maybe some others, depending on how the schedule works out. But we'll have, the goal is for the virtual attendee option to be a full program. It won't be everything that's in person, but it will be at least a full program that you can appreciate a good chunk of the content that is available. In terms of acceptance, some people wonder, are there going to be different standards for virtual versus in person? I will do everything in my power to ensure that is not true. The basic idea that in the past, the way that it's worked is that cut scores have generally been decided on the basis of space. So how many rooms do we have? How many slots can we fill up? And we'd set a cut score based on how many people would physically fit in the conference center. Or the conference hotel. So we're going to do something kind of similar to that. But then whatever that cut score is, we're going to try to place that on the virtual side too, to keep the quality roughly at the same level. So there shouldn't be any difference in acceptance standards between the two in any significant way, if you're worried about that. And yeah, those are my main points. So that's the whole prepared thing. And I see a huge number of questions. So let me scroll way up, and I see a couple people commenting on the audio. Sorry, that was a problem that occurred today. I'm hoping it will continue to be audible at least. Very top of the list. We'll go right down until we are out of time. So Julia's asked, what criteria will you use to decide if the in-person conference will go on as planned, and by what date will you make that call? You want to take that?
This is my crystal ball again. I think that I can say with the current information, working under the current information that we have, I think particularly in light of the recent information from King County, we're requiring vaccination and negative COVID test, and that's 72 hours. It's 72 hours in advance PCR, and then on-site rapid test being negative. Barring some, again, this is just me as a person, so I just want to be clear, this is not me speaking on behalf of necessarily all of the executive board and the SIOP administrative office who would be actually voting on these decisions. This is me, Whitney, as conference chair, to make a recommendation. I don't foresee that being something that we are going to be doing this year. I think we will thankfully be having, in confidence, saying we have the in-person. Obviously, you are all monitoring as we are. If there's some new variant that, is escaping vaccines and it's a whole new ball game, then obviously revisit. But I think under the current landscape, we will be having the in-person, and we look forward to seeing you in Seattle for those who are comfortable.
Yeah, I think it's it is an important point that we are mostly listening to national public health guidance at this point. So in the event that there were local restrictions and Seattle doesn't want us doing it anymore, or there's a new national restriction, I don't know, COVID, I don't even know what later letters are, Zeta, I don't know. There's some later COVID that's problematic. Then we will be essentially asking everybody in the in-person program if they want to switch over to the virtual program and moving the whole thing virtual. But that, I agree. I don't see that being something that would be made electively. I think that's going to be based on external factors at this point. Chris asks, can we have mixed registrants on the same panel? So I think I did talk about that. The goal of the virtual program is really to increase accessibility for presenters. So people that normally would not be able to present their work at SIOP for whatever reason. And this year that includes these kind of pandemic related health concerns and that sort of thing. But this was a part of a larger plan that's just been accelerated a bit to increase these accessibility options. So you definitely can have mixed on a virtual submission. You cannot have mixed on an in-person submission. So one question that I've got a few already, and then this is, by the way, if you send an email to program@siop.org, I will get that and I will answer your questions. Already got a good flow of them, which is fine. But one of the ones that I've gotten several times now is, can we have these mixed presenters in an in-person session? That is, by the conference charter, not allowed. So what we don't want is for people that have, put in the resources and the time to go in the in-person session to be sitting there watching, Zoom recordings. So to avoid that experience, there's just a blanket prohibition on having virtual attendees in in-person sessions. That said, there may be some situations where during the actual conference where, somebody gets a positive COVID test the day before the session and you have to kind of figure out what to do with that. There may be one or two of those, but it is not a matter of policy at all. And is in fact against what we want people to do. So in your submissions, an in-person submission must contain all people that plan to, at least as of now, to present in person. And for virtual, it can be mixed. So that's the balance. Alexandra Andre says, will virtual participants use Whova? The answer is yes. Whova is at least planned now to be the long-term sort of virtual solution for SIOP.
And I would interrupt to say that all registrants will use Whova. So that's going to be the platform for everything, for accessing just even the program and making your agenda. So even if you're going, I'm in person, I don't want anything to do with it, I don't want to look at all that, you'd be missing a lot, first of all, because there's going to be more in the content library too, I think. So I think, but Whova will be for everyone. That's how you access everything and find locations, etc.
Yeah, Whova is the conference program at this point. So you definitely want to have that in order to participate. But yeah, virtual, actually, I guess I don't know if virtual will be entirely through Whova, because we will still be using things like the Gather platform, the virtual chair platform we used before. So Whova is more like the hub around which all of the activity takes place, I think is a way to think about it.
Yeah, it'll be if you go to, you could find other ways to access things, I guess, put it that way. But if you go to Whova, everything will be in Whova and you'll jump out to wherever you need to be from there.
Perfect. Anita asks, I'm new to the field. How will the conference benefit me? Woo. Do you want to take this one?
Well, sure. Yeah, for sure. I think two kind of off the cuff response are definitely if you attend in person. I think that if you're a first time one, it's a lively group. I think very social in nature. There's lots of opportunities for connections. I think especially this year, giving an extra attention to, particularly after being virtual for 2 years, really prioritizing time, playing with the schedule a bit more to allow time for some intentional networking and things along those lines. So perhaps obviously those plans are not all fleshed out. So I'm not offering specifics right now, but that's a comment. If you're entertaining coming in person, I think you'll find it very worthwhile for creating kind of networking opportunities and connecting with your colleagues. And then virtually, if you're considering attending as a virtual registrant for the first time, there's always, there's too much to do at SIOP as far as educational. This will be back to Richard, so you can say more maybe about what they're planning with some of the special things. But there's always too many choices, or at least that's my problem. So many concurrent things going on. So I think as a virtual registrant, it actually gives you the luxury of being able to, do more. And also we said, some of the benefits, the feedback we received from 2020 and 2021 were that you get like a front seat to everything, which often sometimes you don't do. You're in the back of the room peering over lots of people, and you're right there interacting with the audience and chat feature, et cetera. So those are two quick responses for you. I don't know if you want to add anything else, Richard.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so the program, if you've never been before, the SIOP program is, I want to say it's like 95% submitted presentations, like from the peer review program, the thing that we have the submissions open for, and about 5 to 10% what we call invited content, which is curated by the SIOP program committee. We have subcommittees upon subcommittees trying to put together the most just, compelling and interesting and informative and valuable content that they can across a quite a wide, diverse set of individuals that all have, different goals for their SIOP experiences. So between the peer-reviewed program and the invited program together, there's just an enormous amount of content to absorb. So from an educational standpoint, it's the easiest way to get a lot of information about the current sort of state of the art in both research and practice. I mean, I can't imagine any better way to do it, because otherwise you're always limited by personal interest and where you happen to search for in Google Scholar and the people in your graduate program or whatever else. I will add beyond that though that I first attended SIOP. Can't do math real quick. I think 17 years ago. It's been a long time. And I've met people as a grad student at the in-person SIOP conference that I still collaborate with, or at the very least, when I go to SIOP, I'm like, hey, you're that dude. Like, that still happens. It's historically been the way that our field has connected, just socially with each other. Take a break from the intense intellectual work that we all do, whether as students or in industry or faculty. And to just spend some time together. So it's really a formative experience. Like, I mean, obviously, if we didn't believe in SIOP, we wouldn't be here in these volunteer roles, like talking to you about it. But I think there are many benefits associated with attending the conference. I would strongly recommend it in any form.
I might also just plug while you're getting the next question, Richard, too, if you are new, if you're out there considering joining or attending for the first time, and this sounds overwhelming almost the way you described it, there are specific programs for newcomers to the conference. So there's kind of a welcome and getting you started. There's an ambassador program to, and mentoring opportunities. So we have supports in place with a team of folks that volunteer, or the machine of volunteers behind SIOP. So hopefully we're not overwhelming. There are people there to help you navigate as well.
Yeah, next question I've got from Caitlin is, will SIOP's submission date be permanently shifted to October, or should we expect it to return to September? Oh, man, that's a great question. So the main reason that it used to be September, it was because that was essentially the latest it could be in time to print the physical paper conference program that we had for so many years. So by moving to this kind of greener approach and centralizing it on Whova, it gives us a lot more options as to when that is. That said, the specific timing of that submission is more or less up to the program chair in any given year. My personal interest was not burdening grad students fresh coming back in the fall semester with having to put together SIOP presentations simultaneously. So I have never really liked the September date, and given the option to shift it forward to October, I definitely push for that, and that's where I would prefer to see it stay. That said, it is in the hands of program chairs, at least as of right now. I can't imagine any great reason to shift it back, but I wouldn't expect it to go back, but yeah, there is the possibility, I suppose. Next question from Penny: how early Saturday will we be ending? Lunch-ish?
Lunch-ish is correct. The current plans are for a closing lunch reception. So we do intend to provide you with a meal. So hopefully you will stay for that. But through the target right now, kind of pending, Richard's work, we have different roles, but then they're complementary and they intersect about the scheduling. But the current plan is to end at noon Pacific time. And it would be closing with the lunch reception ending around noon.
Next question. I see the comments about audio. I hope it's getting better. That just happened today and I couldn't fix it fast enough. Next question, though, from Ian. For poster sessions, will there be set expectations on how many people will be able to join a room in person? That feels like both poster and other sessions, but yeah, in general, actually, I haven't heard the update on this recently. What's the current plan?
That's going to be an evolving. So I should speak as I'm the official authority, but we have to abide by the rules and guidelines of, it will be what is Seattle saying, what is King County, what is Seattle saying, and then specifically what is our host saying. So the Washington State Convention Center. So if they have rules in place at that time, then we would need to abide by them. I'm saying this, but currently I do not. When we visited in June, there were no restrictions on capacity. And I believe that is the current policy as well, or I should say, I guess it's policy. I believe that's the case as well. So I would assume, again, using current information, no room capacity restrictions. Again, that could change, but that is the current information, how we're operating.
Great. Good info. Our next question from Alice. What happens if a panelist for an accepted in-person session is no longer comfortable coming to the in-person conference? Can the session be flipped to virtual? So, I mentioned already that if there are overwhelming conditions that cause everybody to flip to virtual, there is a plan in place for that. Beyond that, we are taking what is essentially the same strategy as in past years, where if it's not a new problem for a person to suddenly not be able to attend. That's happened throughout SIOP. So if one or two people, for example, are suddenly uncomfortable, then it's really up to the session chairs to decide what to do about that. So historically, that might mean swapping in somebody different. Sometimes that's, I've seen if a faculty person or grad student are planned to present a project, maybe the other one presents their part of the session instead. That's a really common approach. Cutting the whole session is an option. And virtual is hypothetically an option in that situation. However, the warning I will give you is that there's no guarantee that there will be sufficient bandwidth to essentially support a lot of virtual content from presenters. So we really don't want to emphasize that as an option, because there's just, based on what the venue can do and based on how the Wi-Fi works, there's just no guarantee that it would work really well. So our recommendation is, if possible, to find somebody else that's in person, like connected to the same project, to take their place. At least that's what I've been recommending. But otherwise, yeah, that's pretty much the extent of the options at this point.
Hey, Richard, the one thing, going back to the poster question on space, it occurred to me after I commented that it might be worth mentioning, because the in-person posters are traditionally in the exhibit halls. And I think it might be worthwhile commenting that the exhibit hall space in the Washington State Convention Center is huge. Massive. So I think just for anyone who is asking about space restrictions, and then beyond that as well, we just have an abundance of space. And the Washington State Convention Center, when we're out there, it's big and beautiful and lots of space to move around. So if anyone is on the fence about whether attending or not, and with space being a concern, there's even, fingers crossed for good weather. There's a great open air outdoor area right outside the convention center, which we'd have access to for eating, if you were someone who wanted to wear a mask during sessions and then be outside for those sorts of endeavors. So I just wanted to put out there, it's a lot of space that we have.
Yeah, it's an interesting trade-off in convention centers. In Hawaii, it was the first time I ever really thought about it, and that it was just so pretty. it was large, and there was so much light, and there were so many places to go, and it's the same kind of experience in this one. So even though it's not the conference hotel experience that we get most years, it's still there are a lot of really big advantages to this place, and especially during a pandemic, having all that extra walking around space is going to be really great. Christopher asks, what kind of documentation is needed for vaccination status? I'm wondering if I need to bring my CDC record card with me or if there is some digital verification. Ooh.
Yeah, great question. So the SIOP Administrative Office is already exploring what we will be using and presuming partnering with, we're not sure yet how the logistics of it, but partnering with them to make sure that it meets their standards, et cetera. So there will be, we will be definitely clearly communicating with you as to, so no sense of urgency right now, but we'll be clearly communicating with you what is expected or as, evidence or validation, to use their terminology. So stay tuned, as we will be as well as we get something in place.
Penny asks, I love the accessibility angle. Will this be something we'd consider keeping in some capacity even after a return to quote unquote normal? So yeah, that is the plan. Again, even before the pandemic, there was an obvious interest in having some more virtual accessible options for both presenting and for attending SIOP. And we kind of frequently hear people saying, oh, I just really love to go, but I can't afford it, or I can't get away from work that long, or any number of reasons. And we've also struggled with issues, not we, like the royal we, SIOP has struggled with how exactly to best serve all of the various, groups of people that it serves. So this is, I think, is a long-term plan. That's my understanding, at least. And that having this kind of accessibility approach, maybe not exactly what this is, like I can see many variations in how this is approached, but the general idea of providing options for people is definitely in the plan.
Yeah, and it's really helpful to hear your feedback too. I mean, obviously we've been somewhat experimenting the past few years, like testing to see what works well, what needs improvement, and trying to tweak along the way here. And it's somewhat no different this time too. It's sort of kind of our first foray back into in-person and virtual. So definitely it's helpful to hear feedback from folks. Long way from now, but on that conference valuation survey coming in May 2022.
Caitlin asks, will virtual sessions be running concurrently to in-person sessions? And I see Emily Solberg is jumping in, answering questions. Emily being our past program chair, so that's fun. So will they be running concurrently? The answer is yes. So the way that we're going to try to design it, if you have attended past SIOPs, there's what we call the program grid, which is where you have all these different locations as columns in this big chart, and then the times running down the side, and all the individual sessions are placed within it. So the goal is in that grid that you probably most of you have seen, that we're going to add more columns. So the idea is that our virtual sessions will be running in the same program, just they will be on virtual tracks, virtual rooms kind of thing, versus the in-person parts. So the goal, again, in that is that we don't want this, accessible option that we're trying to create to be like a second-class experience. We want it to be the same live sessions, like seeing people, being able to interact as much as possible. We want it to be part of the conference, not like this not so great, like we move all the people over here that need this. We don't want that. So the goal is very much to have the same quality and type of experience that people that attend in person do, even if for mostly budget reasons we can't do that with the entire live in-person program, that we at least have sort of recreated a lot of that same experience. So yeah, those will be run mostly at the same time. There will, at least I think it's currently in the plan, and maybe Whitney can correct me if this is not quite right, some content will be released ahead of time, and I'm that in the week before in the pre-conference material. So that won't be concurrent with the main main conference, but that's also intended to be for everybody. That's like virtual content for everybody that's attending in person or virtually. I think that's how we're doing it, right?
Yeah, we haven't exactly kind of nailed down what the offerings will be, but yes, the concept is that in the conference week 1, the all virtual, there will be some offerings available in advance to what we would typically kind of call the conference, which would normally in several years ago only be that 3-day period, whereas now it's expanded. So
Saul asks, do acceptance standards vary for alternative sessions, or are they just as likely to be accepted? That's a fun question. So I will admit, even though I've been attending SIOP now for 16 or whatever years, I did not understand how things got onto the program until becoming program chair. And I don't know why that is now, but maybe I just never asked the right person. So what happens is that all sessions are assigned to peer reviewers, and the peer reviewers provide ratings, and those ratings are essentially what's used to determine cut scores. There are not any different standards by session type, but that doesn't stop peer reviewers from judging different types of sessions differently. So historically, we do see a little bit of variance in terms of how reviewers view the quality of sessions. I couldn't tell you if that's because of the session type or because certain types tend to attract different kinds of submitters. Like, I don't know. But there's nothing that we're doing on the SIOP side in determining the program to like set different quality levels for different types of things. Like that's not a thing that happens. So it's much like publishing in general, it is left to the whim of peer reviewers, which we hope are of high quality and paying attention. And if you haven't signed up to be a reviewer, please do. But yeah, there's nothing we do on our side to contribute to that. Lauren asks, can you clarify how in-person attendees will attend virtual sessions? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mentioned this earlier. For those that are presenting, which again we should think of as different from attending. For those that are presenting, there will be a space in the conference center in the same floor and next to all of the other sessions, so that if you're presenting in a virtual session, you can easily just like you're going to another room, just walk over and here's a room set up for the purpose of this virtual like presentation. We're gonna based on how many people submit and what the program ends up looking like, we may have more than one of those rooms, and I'm not quite sure exactly how it's going to work out yet. But the general idea is we want to support people presenting virtually to support their colleagues that can't be there in person, even if they're in person themselves. So we'll be supporting that. For attending, it's different. Everything will be still through the Whova app, so you can really do it however you want. You could go back to your room if you wanted and open up your laptop and hop on Zoom and watch some of the virtual content. You could just open up your phone and stick on some headphones in between sessions and listen. Like, it's totally up to you how to attend that session if you choose to. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really just kind of, buyer's choice, so to speak. So if you want to attend a virtual session, you'll have full access to it as an in-person attendee. So it's just a matter of, figuring out where you want to be when you do it and making sure you have, Wi-Fi, I guess.
Yeah, and we have a bunch of presenters too with the small rooms that we're going to basically like outfit. It's almost just like you'd be presenting at SIOP, but you have no audience. So you'll just go into your room and do your presentation virtually with everyone else. And if we have, depending on rooms, we might need to make a sign-up schedule or something like that, like, you reserve it. So those details to be fleshed out over the coming months as we see numbers and Richard makes the schedule with his team, et cetera. So.
So many responses from Emily. Thank you, Emily. The next question from Weichuan is both proof of vaccination and a negative COVID test required for in-person, or just one?
So it's proof of vaccination. Well, I am not the county health official, but as I read it, it is vaccination, or if you're not vaccinated for whatever the reason, you have to have a negative PCR test 72 hours in advance, and then also an on-site negative rapid test.
And I will add to that's based on the requirements right now.
Correct.
So
stay tuned.
Yeah, especially as our understanding and public knowledge of booster necessity and all that starts to kick in, this could change a bit. So this is not a SIOP thing at this point. We're really being led by national and local standards for public health. So whatever that is what we'll be doing.
Yeah, and I should also mention too, we have, if you go to the SIOP annual conference website, this information is on there with like a link and whatnot, so you can read. I'm sure you're trying to digest as we're talking, but if you go there, it's a good resource, just to read what it says now, and then you can stay tuned, and we're going to be posting perhaps obviously any updates as things go. So The website is going to be getting populated. There's information there, but obviously as every month goes by, there's going to be more and more content. So I would urge you to check back.
Next, we got a question from Hina. Do all panelists have to be current SIOP members, or can we have non-IOs, that is executives, HR directors, etc., as panelists? So the only requirement for SIOP membership is for the submitter. So the ownership rule means that whoever actually submits the thing needs to have a current registered paid up SIOP membership. For anyone else, they will be required to sign up for a SIOP account on the website, because otherwise you won't be able to search for them in the tool, when you're like searching for co-authors when you're trying to submit. But they don't need to be SIOP members. That said, that means that to attend and present, they will need to pay the non-SIOP member rate, which is a little bit higher. So if they do qualify to be SIOP members, you should definitely do that. Encourage them to go ahead and sign up. But yeah, the only requirement is that the person that literally hits submit on the presentation is a SIOP member. The next, Chris asks, to clarify, if we submit a virtual submission and a bunch of folks are attending in person, will we be able to set up in a physical conference space? And if so, how do we indicate we like that? Ooh. Yeah, so there will be, so I mentioned earlier, there will be a space. The specific logistics of that are not quite worked out yet, which I think Whitney was talking about. So yeah, that I don't think we know the exact process yet, but there will be at some point. Rusty asked, did you say there are 2 conference weekends, the first virtual only and the second both virtual and in person?
Do you want me to, since I think I said that, maybe it's, or do you want to go? So there is on the annual conference website, there's we're positioning it as there's 4 weeks then it's not as though it's going to be from end to end, so, Sunday to Saturday, it's full of content, but those are going to generally when things are occurring, and we'll be populating that with more specifics as we move forward. So the first week, it's kind of what we call like pre-conference activities. So that would be some of the virtual workshops, consortia, akin to what we'd have as the pre-conference workshops on that Wednesday, which will still be happening as well for in-person folks. The second week of April will be what we're calling Conference Week 1 virtual. So it's that entire week is what we're labeling at this time. Although, candidly, we haven't put the exact dates and times on there. We're looking at like a Tuesday through Thursday window. So that's a conference kickoff probably happening on Tuesday, April 19th. So a virtual kickoff for everyone, with live posters occurring and virtual chair using the Gather platform with some interactive breaks. So those sorts of activities occurring where everyone who registers for regardless of in-person or virtual registrant, can participate in that format, in that virtual format that week, in some activities. And then the following week, and yes, we're calling it the week. However, it's truly just Wednesday evening, or if you choose to come in early for pre-conference activities, it'd be Wednesday evening. So Wednesday being the prime time to travel, and then educational programming all day Thursday, all day Friday, Saturday morning, and then closing with a lunch on Saturday the 28th. And then the fourth week being the kind of post-conference, as we're calling it, where it's Whova stays open, you can access recordings, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully that fleshed things out. And as I said before, check back. Will be easier to understand in a grid format on the conference website, and we'll be adding more information as we are ready.
Great. I'll take a brief aside from questions for a second to say that as soon as we are out of questions to answer, we're just going to stop doing this. So there are only a few more left. So if you have questions to ask, please go ahead and ask them, and we will keep asking up until the hour. So please throw that in there if you have any questions left to ask. Otherwise, I think it looks like we got 3 more. For a question from Larry, it sounds like if you have co-authors who are not going to be speakers, they can attend virtually, and the session can still be in person so long as all speakers will be there. Right. That is correct. So It is entirely based around scheduling people in spaces. That's the concern on the submission side. So any your non-contributing presenters can be whatever. It's totally irrelevant to your submission, as long as your speakers are configured in a way that supports your submission type. So in person, all your speakers need to be in person. Virtual, then you can have a mix. Question from Christopher, or maybe more of a comment. I think I got it. If we have a mixed presenter panel we submitted as virtual, they will be allocated physical space to present at SIOP, but everyone will be attending the panel virtually. Yes, that is it.
Yeah. And we realize this is confusing too. I know it's like, we get it. So this is, thank you for Richard for, organizing this for everyone, because so if you're out there going like, I got to ask this again, it's okay. We get it. It took us a while and some humming and hawing to sort through how to make it all work. So, well, we think, knock on wood, make it all work. So just want to let you know that we're here for the questions. It's great. So thank you for your interest.
Yeah, and you don't even want to know about the dozens of people and the hundreds upon hundreds of emails and Zoom calls and everything else to work it all out. But yeah, we think this serves the most communities possible in the best way we can, given the resources and constraints associated with the conference. So, for example, we could have everything virtual and a lot of options if we upped the conference fee by like 400%. So didn't want to do that. So that means that we have to work within the constraints we have. But I think that we ended up with a good balance point where we can serve as many people as possible. I hope. We'll see in the conference feedback, I guess. For only one more question, so if anybody has any more, now's the time. Saul asks, regarding diversity of affiliation rule, are submissions with presenters from the only 2 organizations typically rated lower than more than 2? That is such an interesting question. I actually do not know. As we always said in my program, that's an empirical question. So I'm not sure. I don't know that we've ever collected, at least in program, I don't think we've ever collected or analyzed this data. I don't know, Whitney, if you know anything.
Where's Emily? Emily, are you out there? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
she's so fast. She'll have the data for you in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, I will say for myself, like I have reviewed a few times where I've seen like a symposium submission and there's like 5 things and only one of them is somebody else, and I'm like, I don't know about that. That seems a little suspicious to me. I don't know that I don't think that affected my ratings. I don't know. It's again, I think that's up to peer reviewers as to whether they care or not. And I don't know if they do at this point. That's an interesting question. We don't have any more questions. There's a bunch of, because Whitney can't see this, so I want to relay. There's a bunch of thank yous, great information, etc. So it seems like we've had an impact, I hope. If you do have, if anybody has any further questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up. But if anybody has any further questions, please make sure to jump on to program@siop.org. That's where I can get to your questions. You can also just email the main administrative office. Oh, somebody threw in a question last second. How many in-person attendees are you expecting? Lauren asks. Ooh.
Well, as conference chair, we had over 3,000 last year. So, goal setting here, I am definitely looking to surpass that for sure. So, no, I think that'd be fantastic to have in the, 3,000 to 4,000 range. I think that would be, I guess, for those of you out there who does not know, those numbers don't make that much sense to you. We've been in the past at 5,000, peaking 5,000. So I think a little smaller, just given the circumstances and everything, would not be a bad thing as far as the in-person, I guess, in speaking of the in-person, I think given the format that we've had, we can definitely accommodate, with a virtual 5,000 plus, so we're very optimistic, just given the strong commitment that people have had in 2020 and then an increase in registration in 2021. So hopefully we are on the up and up for 2022.
Yeah, and I will add to that we are looking to you to submit things so that we can get a better answer to that question. So we are very much looking to see what the submission patterns look like in relation to previous years to get a better sense of what the enthusiasm is. Like I hope for a big, exciting program of the same scope we have had historically. But yeah, it's up to you. Tell your friends, get everybody to submit, yeah, we'll hopefully see a lot of you out there in Seattle. Yeah, that's it. Again, any follow-up questions, program@siop.org is me, and I will get those for you. And otherwise, I think that's it. Any closing thoughts, Whitney?
I do, just that we do plan to synthesize this information, teaming with the SIOP Administrative Office to put out a communication with some of the like hot questions, topics, et cetera, from this. So we'll be following up, and if you attended or want to pass that around to anyone else, that should be forthcoming at some point here.
Yeah. Oh, and also, even though this is on my IO Psychology podcast, the Great IO Get Together, subscribe today. Even though it's on this channel, we will be keeping the recording available of this too. I have to clean it up a little bit. So, but that means that if we went through something a little too fast, or you just want to hear it again, this will remain available for the foreseeable future. So feel free to check back here and take a look at it. Yeah. Otherwise, that's it. Thank you all so much for coming. Good luck with your submissions, and have a good fall.